Yo, dudes and dudettes, what's going on with y'all? So I have got a new book for us called The Land, Founding, the Litrpg saga, the Chaos series, Book 1. If there were any more colons in there, I think the title alone could be considered an orgy. So a buddy of mine, Mark, suggested that I read this because the show is a thing that I sometimes do. I decided that we should all experience this book together. I honestly know very little of it, only that it's a fantasy novel, so let's go ahead and dive on in. So the book starts from the point of view of a dark prince, a being of some sort of power, watching bored while the dark queen listens to the begging of a bunch of her subjects. It mentions that normally these beings would be extremely powerful in their own right, even be considered gods somewhere else. However, here they are very powerless. This actually isn't a horrible way to introduce the Dark Queen because it tells us in a few paragraphs that she's a big-time player and that we should probably pay attention to her. So the Dark Prince wants to escape his land for reasons, and has watched the Earth kill itself for a few thousand years and figures, you know what, we're probably a good candidate to come and destroy the place. So far, so good. Then comes a part that actually irks me a bit, in that it says because people don't care about their souls, they desire escapism, and we're all looking for it in a release, be it in games or any other form of art, which is actually very fine and a fair point. Then it starts kicking you in the balls for liking RPGs, saying that you're busy selling away your soul by doing so and not reading the fine print in games, in which case I think that view must be lovely from the glass house that the author lives in. It then goes on to bank about the reader's supposed love of said RPG video games in several ways before introducing the cliche sucked into a whole new world for the vices of your life crap. Honestly, this seems like somebody once played D&D as a kid and then heard about the satanic panic of the 80s and thought, hey, that could be a book! Which actually irritates me as a Christian who enjoys playing such games. Also, I was willing to accept the whole Dark Court, Dark Queen, Dark Prince thing because I assumed that was all part of the fantasy world. No, not the case. The dark stuff is the real world, which I'm assuming is using the Earth world. It even talks about how the Earth religion often warns of people like the Dark Prince. So I don't know that this author is someone who just seriously bought into said satanic panic, or if they were somebody that wanted to avoid pushback from readers by actually saying God or Satan. I don't know which one would cause me to have a greater amount of disrespect for the creator. So overall, Book and me are not starting off well, but hey, am I not allegedly an open-minded person? Well, no, not really, but I haven't completely given up on this yet. I suppose another problem I have with this book is its desire to have its cake and eat it too. Here's an actual line from early on in the book. Showing bravery on par with assaulting a horde of giants or talking to a really hot chick at the bar. I mean, what? And sure, a book like Critical Failures can make something this goofy work because its tone is like that from the very beginning, and clearly comes from a love of tabletop RPGs. However, I don't get the impression from this book that that's the case. Look, maybe the author does love RPG games. Maybe I'm wrong, but first impressions count for a lot. And if you shit into my hands once, you really can't be surprised if I don't feel like standing behind you anymore. Also, I think I missed the main character's name at first mentioned, and I didn't know it until like 3 more pages in, because the author keeps using pronouns. And yes, pronouns are fine for a while, but eventually you have to use a name. I never felt like I didn't know Katniss's name in the Hunger Games, or Harry Potter's name in Harry Potter. Although I guess that one's kind of cheating a tad bit, isn't it? Anyway, we kick off with who I eventually learned to be James, our MC, meeting a one-foot imp who we don't get a name for, who delivers a shit ton of exposition that feels disturbing because we don't really have a grip of what we already should know, let alone what we're meant to be learning. Honestly, the tutorial in this book is a lot longer than tutorials in some of my favorite RPG games. So to kick off, our MC gets his ass kicked by a wasp, fairly standard new game stuff, and he actually shouts out WTF. I'm not abbreviating. He actually shouts out the letters WTF. When you're actually in extreme pain, which I will remind you but goes into very clear detail that he is, why would you shout out the letters? This is that cringy feeling of a 40-year-old trying to fit in with all the fellow kids who like the Maymays and drink the White Claws. Am I right, my fellow kids? Anyway, the imp spends like 20 minutes telling James that this is not a game. He actually says it over and over, and then James has to look at a stat page of all his health, mana, constitution, etc. Just, you can't have both, man. If it's real life sucked into a game thing, that's fine. But you can't tell us this isn't a game and then literally call him a character with a stat page. Again, so far this just seems like Critical Failures done so much worse. Once our NPC, who mind you is not a character in a game, learns that he is level 1, the imp calls him, and I quote, a basic bitch. Oh snap, he got pahoned, Am I right, my fellow kids? Look, if you want to have fantastic elements, don't try to have 21st century slang put into it too. I mean, in Lord of the Rings, if Gandalf had just looked at Frodo and simply gone, YOLO, lol, it would have just been stupid. And that's the effect that it has here. So James decides to call himself Richter, which I'm sure is something that sounded really cool to every 12-year-old that heard it, and for some reason it's presented as something extremely profound. Anyway, they basically go through a huge expedition dump of this world. Then the audiobook that I was listening to anyway does something so incredibly dumb it physically hurt me. Richter says that he owes the imp, whose name I've already forgotten because it sucked, a favor. And the not game gives him a notification in the form of a ping. But instead of the reader saying ping, or having a reasonable level sound effect that might enhance the audio, a fucking high-pitched ping blows my left ear out. So thanks for that, man. Also, just so the book can stick its dick in my cornflakes again, it does it about 5 more times in quick succession. And then 3 more times a little while later. This sound will now haunt my dreams, I am quite sure. Then, and I swear I'm not making this up, this actually happens, Richter kills a fox, acknowledges the slightly haunting fact that he just destroyed what seemed to feel like a very real, living, and breathing creature that even bled and whimpered its last breath realistically, and then he sings, what does the fox say? Fucking what? Is this a Mad Lib? Am I insane? This is so dumb! I mean, for fuck's sake, Color Wheels have a more consistent tone than this book. So, as the book goes on, Richter levels up, and this book just loves to go on and on and on about numbers and percentages and point alignment, and in a video game, which I remind you, if we have been told this is not, all that sort of stuff might be important to the player, because it allows them to make decisions about leveling up. However, as a non-interactive medium, like a book, that sort of information would really be better to be generalized. It's good to tell me that he wants to increase his abilities with the bow. It's pointless to go on about plus 2% to accuracy, plus 4% to draw time, or whatever it is. Richter continues on a little way and runs into a group of sprites who basically decide to kidnap him instead of killing him, because he can understand them for some reason. I think it's because he ate some magic bushberries, and thusly we see how insane video game logic actually is, and why I don't usually work it into a book. You know, it's not too often a moment in a book actually makes me call aloud in indignation, but this one does manage it. He's introduced to the Sprite Queen, who asks why he can understand the sprites. Fair question. I was also curious. He claims it's because he's from a different world, Earth, and says, and I quote, specifically ATL Georgia, shouty. I mean, is he supposed to be a douchebag? Because usually we're supposed to like our main character, and that just makes me groan. Anyway, he gets a quest to go kill 5 wolves and gain some favor with the sprites, and when he kills the first one, it once again goes into a lot of big detail. Richter screams in celebration, and yet once again, I'm curious if I'm reading about the future of a serial killer. Anyway, Richter gets his shit kicked in by wolves, reloads naked, because sure, why not? And then restarts the quest and makes friends, sort of, with the sprite that was mocking him, and beforehand watched him die. All the while, he gains new skills and abilities, fairly standard RPG stuff, but remember, this is not a game. I don't even fully get the point of the whole beginning with the Dark Prince, and I would feel a lot kinder towards this book if it had started off with just Richter instead, but when you insist that we shit in the sound box before getting into it, you really shouldn't be surprised if I decide I'm going to throw a little at you. So he heads back to complete the quest and unlocks the second part of it, even though this isn't a game, remember. Anyway, he gets some new gear, and as a sorry from the sprites because they let him die without helping, a sprite named Cyan becomes his companion, and he gets some armor, fairly cliche bullshit. Time marches on, and they find a goblin group that has been supposedly corralled by some strong figure. Honestly, now this just feels like a baby's first D&D adventure, but it's not a game. I seriously don't understand the overemphasis on that point. So they continue on the quest, making their way into the goblin camp and corner the leader, who immediately monologues and starts talking about ancient powers, and it kind of just feels almost insultingly, hey, this is totally an important thing that you need to take care of. Hint, hint. Just like, I don't get why this book is so determined to be different from other in a video game world books. Just admit your shit and own up to it, and I'll stop calling you a liar. I mean, is this guy a hipster? Yeah, I wrote a book where people get sucked into a video game. Yeah, man, everyone's done that. Yeah, but mine is also, like, not a video game, and it's run by Satan. I mean, just like, why? So Richter and Cyan clear the town, and Richter levels up twice and takes the town for his own, which is a place of power and gains a fuck ton of fame right off the bat. This could only be better if he had Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber and could force heal people for no adequately explored reason. But in the next few chapters, it's fairly straightforward. Starts a new quest, gets new power, kills some things, level up, get more shit. So far, every RPG ever. Except possibly Undertale. So things continue, and Richter learns a new air ability because of higgledy-piggledy bullshittery, and can teach others in his village. So he chooses to teach Cyan. This is something I mentioned because it is an uncharacteristically sweet moment between the two of them, where Cyan was convinced he could never learn such types of magics, and through Richter's friendship he does, which solidifies their relationship to one another in-game, and it's honestly an extremely sweet moment, and one that floored me coming from this author. It's great! Which is why the author then shits all over it by having Richter literally say, "Enough of that, no one likes pussy." And apparently I do, because it's far and away the best part of the entire story thus far. Anyway, things continue on, and the pair make their way to the nearest big boy city, so that Richter can poach villagers, carpenters, and the like. Then the book harps on about racism, and how it's even in the game world, although mind you this is not a game, and he can't get away from it. And it's actually kind of stupid that the book does this, because both books and games are a form of escapism, which is why it's so weird that this book seems to drunkenly meander across the drama and comedy lines. If it were a serious story meant to provoke thought and stir emotion, then okay, great point to make. But this is a book where the MC sang, "What does the fox say?" and shit all over the gaming community about 2 seconds in, so no dice there. It's also weird because Richter keeps referring to the game without listing what the fuck game he was in or how he got into this one, and seemingly doesn't concern him whatsoever. And there is literally zero mention of his life back on Earth. It just comes across as paper thin after the paper has been whittled all over. So Richter was lucky enough to have a small treasure trove set up for him in his village, because we haven't given this Gary Shoe enough shit yet. He goes and buys a ton of magical stuff. However, he ends up spending time bitching about how much money he gives up to buying several magical items in the shop. First off, you are buying magical stuff. That's going to be incredibly useful. So yeah, a bag of holy is probably going to cost you more than a second-hand car would. Secondly, if this guy truly had played any RPG ever, you know that you end up sitting atop a mountain of gold before long, especially if you put a bit of effort into that area. Anyway, he ends up convincing a ton of people to come back to the village he's claimed, and a relatively new thief who isn't interesting or fleshed out enough to remember dies from saving them from a high-level threat. Bing, bang, boom, book is done. Honestly, this one felt pretty conflicting, because based in premise, it's something I should like, but the odd writing choices coupled with a completely unrelated opening that shits all over the gaming community put me in a really sour mood early on, and the end result is that it made me very hostile towards a book that could have made its intentions a lot clearer early on. Again, compare it to Critical Failures. That book opens up with a bunch of friends arguing and playing D&D in a chicken shop after hours. It sets a lighthearted and goofy tone. So, even when it deals with some of the more ridiculous situations, such as peeing holy water into a vampire's coffin to kill it once it's defeated in battle, and no, I'm not making that up, it comes across as just a goofy moment from a goofy book. However, moments in this book, such as "What does the fox say?" or "Shouty," instead feel very disjointed and disconnected from the rest of the world. Also, Richter being the sole character we care about hurts a lot because Richter seemingly has no life outside of this game, which apparently never was a game, somehow. Sure, we're told Richter had something of a life, but we never actually see it, and we don't see it impact him in any way. All in all, I found this book to be profoundly disappointing and have zero inclination to continue with the series, so my personal score is a 3 out of 10. It's not quite the worst thing I've ever read, but there are so many series in this genre that have done it and done it better. I would hardly recommend something like Critical Failures or even Ready Player One long before this. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at that bingo card. And we obliterated that bingo card. I mean, that thing has so many stamps on it, it looks like it's a postcard headed to Neptune. Look at that sucker. Oh man, but for a single abusive love triangle, we would have maxed it out. Oh well. Well, that's all for the review, folks. So if you have something else you want me to read and review, leave a comment down below, let me know. And until next time, drink plenty of water, tell your parents that you love them, and stroke your mustache at night.